Om Shanti. Good afternoon. Those who are seated at the back, would you like to occupy the front seats? Or you're fine where you are? That's fine too. Okay, a very, very warm welcome to all of you to Peace Village Learning and Retreat Center. I'm Madhvi, and a student of Brahma Kumaris, and the MC for this event today. So what a beautiful day, right? Nature is supporting us so perfect. And we are amongst the like-minded friends today. So, did you enjoy the harp music? Yeah, so let's give a round of applause to Sister Kyoko. It was very beautiful. Sister Kyoko, she is a certified healing harpist. And she performs her healing music at various facilities in San Francisco. And she's my good friend. And she's been studying Raj Yoga for past more than 23 years. So thank you, Kyoko. Beautiful. So those who would want to have sound enhancement, we have headphones. So there are a few headphones here on the table here. If you would like to have them, Brother Renal can help you. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Sister Kala to share a few words. Sister Kala is the director of Peace Village. She's been with the Brahma Kumaris for over 35 years. And she plays a very good, balanced yogi life with being a spiritual teacher and also being an administrative guide at Peace Village. So welcome, Sister Kala. She's the director and I'm welcoming her. Over to you.
Good afternoon, good evening. Yes, I was thinking that when you get introduced, you get to know all the things that you have to do, right? What you have to be, in other words. So I am indeed extremely happy and privileged to welcome you all to Peace Village today. Some of you, many of your faces are very familiar, and I'm so happy to see you again. I think there are a few of you who might be here for the first time, if I can see a show of hands, maybe. Yeah, a few. So very, very special and warm welcome. Not any warmer than it is, okay? So Peace Village, as you might have seen it passing by, has been around for now 24 years. And out of the 24 years, I've been here for 23 years. And it was acquired by the Brahma Kumaris. It was a ski resort, as many of you would have recognized if you knew the area before. And then since then, of course, you would see that there's a lot of transformation happening outside and visibly. But basically what Peace Village has been doing is having retreats and programs for inner transformation, spiritual transformation. So when people come into here as Friday night, for example, we usually take a picture of them just for ourselves. And then we take a picture of them Sunday when they leave. And then we really know what's happened inside. Because there's a huge, I wouldn't say huge, but people come from, especially in city area and, busy walks of life. And they are carrying a lot of burden, right? Stress, you call it. But usually the 2 days that they spend here really relieves them of a lot of unnecessary tension and stress that we take on in life. So it kind of tells you what happens inside these walls. The Peace Village is run by the Brahma Kumaris, World Spiritual Organization, as it's called in United States. Brahma Kumaris are a worldwide movement, spiritual movement, and their emphasis is on spiritually orienting everyone to themselves. In other words, to look at everything, including their own identity, with a spiritual lens. And that's only the beginning of their transformation and inner development. And that leads to many, many other steps along the way. So Brahmakumaris hold programs that espouse this spiritual way of understanding things, experiencing things, and we call this as a body of knowledge called Raj Yoga, knowledge and meditation. So that's taught through the courses and the programs. But also, as you see in Peace Village, it doesn't limit itself to that, but also how spirituality reflects in all the areas of life. So there is no membership, quote unquote, for the Brahmakumaris, but people do come to programs like this, and if they get interested, they want to know more, they come to more programs and classes and courses and start meditating, and then eventually it's up to them how much of that spirituality they want to adopt for themselves. So it's a very open-ended approach of spirituality that you will find. And also, we have more than 110 countries. I heard today it's 120 countries that we are operating through. And most of it is through the centers and retreat centers. And now, of course, we have a big virtual presence as well, with lots of programs available online. And of course, we are also affiliated with the United Nations as a non-governmental organization, and we hold a consultative status with the Economic and Social Council. So very active. And so it's an important day when we have a very important person who also represents us and really connects us to the world in many of the global forums, Sister Jayanti, and so you were invited for that, right? And you want to hear that soon. But before inviting Sister Jayanti, I want to invite Sister Judy, who's also been with us for 17 years now in Peace Village. Her spiritual life with the Brahmakumari is about 27 years, and she has been mostly media, in the field of media, doing many wonderful things, including executive positions. But since she came to Peace Village, and even before that, she is really, really interested in how to integrate what she knows spiritually in outwardly presenting it in global context as well. So she is the one who is the host of the Call of the Time dialogue that happened recently in the last weekend. And I think the title comes from that same dialogue, Call of the Time. So I'm going to invite Judy to take the stage and help us to get to know Sister Jayanti a little bit better, and also what's going to happen today. And thank you for coming.
Mountaintop is a little bit tricky, isn't it? It looks very rural, but actually amazing things go on here. And if you don't tell people, they'll never know how amazing. Like the first community pharmacy, publicly supported pharmacy in the country, for example. There's amazing things that come and go, and you don't know about them unless we write you and say, come be with us. So the guest tonight is Sister Jayanti, who lives in London most of the time. He's a very wise and clear spiritual kind of resource, expert, but mostly friend. She is a very good friend. If she is your friend, you are in luck, because she can explain to you things that don't necessarily make sense in other ways until you get that spiritual context. Usually she's on bigger stages. She has led meditations at the World Economic Forum in Davos. She's gone to all of the COP conferences for the UN, which is their environmental conferences, since 2009, and has spoken and done sessions and been invited onto panels, etc. She's been extremely active in the world of the business of the environmental crisis and what the spiritual dimension of that is. And then she just travels constantly and speaks. So we are really lucky that in this little auditorium with a handful of us here on the mountaintop, she is able to spend a while with us and talk about some of these deeper questions. I can tell you more. I could go on and on, but that's enough, right? You get the feeling for who she is. She's really very special. And I'm going to ask her the most difficult questions I can come up with. And then I'm going to turn to you at various points and ask you if I've missed one of those difficult questions to just, we'll have a mic available and you can add your own difficult questions. I've never seen a question that she couldn't offer a wise and gracious and deep answer to. So that's what we're going to do for the next hour. We're going to explore that territory. And like I say, we're okay if you interrupt us. If you've got a thought and it feels urgent, you go ahead and interrupt us. And I want to say welcome to those on Zoom. You know, it's hard to get people in the room when they can sit in their living rooms and watch. So those of you on Zoom, next time you come in person, okay? All right. So without further ado, I want to invite Sister Jayanti to come up and join me on stage. We've known each other a long time. It's like sitting around interviewing your good friend. I think what I'm going to do is start with the biggest questions and then work my way to the smallest ones, all right? So we'll start big. You're okay with that, starting big, going small?
Yes.
We have sound?
Good evening, and Om Shanti, and yes, Judy, that's fine.
Okay. We've got a little mystery going on with the mic, so we'll see if it sorts. So, Sister Jayanti, you are looking at some of our good friends and some of our new friends. So, this mountaintop isn't very big, but we're powerful, right? Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is, what is the significance of the time we're in? And let me just give a line here. So it's pretty clear that there are things going on in the world that are without precedent, that are really big, some of them disturbing, some of them wonderful. And so if there is a way to explain the time, can you give us that kind of frame as we start?
Thank you. It feels as if there's two very contradictory energies working together. One is an energy which is highly, highly toxic and negative, and that's visible in so many different ways in the ego, the greed, the anger that we are seeing all around us. Not in one country, but it's actually a worldwide phenomenon. And then secondly, there seems to be a different energy that's entering the world, which is an energy that's seeking the light, trying to understand, making sense of what's going on. In the last 20 years, I've seen more books on self-development than we've ever had before. And so it does feel as if people are also turning inwards to find answers and to see if there can be a development within the self, a capacity building that can then deal with all these situations in which they use the term now, perma-crisis. It's not just one crisis separated by a few months or a few years or even a few days. It's a permanent state of crisis. And so how do I deal with all of that? And a lot of people are turning to meditation. 10 years ago, it would have been difficult for some people to say, I'm a meditator. But today, they say it with pride. They're able to acknowledge that they're moving in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And so there's a negative force that's pulling us down, and there's slowly, very slowly, another energy, a spiritual energy that seems to be coming in. And so when these two things come together, the power of negativity, but also the positive, then you see there's a lot of turbulence, a lot of uncertainty. And my hope is that whoever is watching and all of you who are here are very aware that if we focus on the positive, pure spiritual energy, that makes a difference not only to oneself individually, but also it makes a difference to the circle that I'm connected with, whether it's family or colleagues and so on. But hopefully when all these circles come together, it can have a big impact in the world.
Okay, so there's good things happening and there's bad things happening. Lots of turmoil, lots of crisis. And you're kind of leading into this other question I want to talk about. So there's things that are happening that are so disturbing that it's hard to not think about them, right? The things that are so upsetting that we get a bit stuck. How can we live in a world that is this troubled and not be constantly affected by it?
Firstly, I make a choice for myself. Which direction do I want to go in? If I just let things slide, then the gravity is such that it's going to pull me down further and further into negativity. And is that where I want to belong? Or do I want to look at life from a different perspective? Do I want to explore the spiritual dimension, the inner dimension? And if I've made that choice for myself, then I begin a journey, the inner journey, and I study spiritual matter, I practice meditation and so on. And so at least first, I personally am protected from the influence of negativity around me. And then I see that there are many others who would like to approach life differently, but maybe they don't have the courage yet. Maybe they don't have the faith. Maybe they're just searching. And so if I then share with them some of the things I'm experiencing and help them, then the power of positivity can continue to grow. And the good wishes that I receive from those who have been served in that way really help me personally also. So that too becomes a very strong protective armor around me, which means that I'm not impacted by the negativity as much.
Okay, but I want to check in with you all. So some of you have some kind of meditation practice? Let's just see how many. All right. When bad things happen, do you ever get affected? Yeah. So well, there's got to be, how do we get strong enough? I mean, it's one thing to, okay, I'm meditating, but then something really dreadful happens, or really scary. So how do we get powerful enough to do what you're saying?
I know there can be meditation in many, many different ways. Some people use a word, a sacred sound. They use an image. They use many different things. But when I'm meditating, and we meditate along the lines of what is called Raj Yoga, So the word yoga means union, connection, and Raja, the master, the sovereign, so the connection with the highest, the one who is the supreme being. When I connect with the supreme, then what I'm doing is tapping into the source of love, of peace, of truth, of purity. And when I do this, I'm filling myself with those qualities. And so where yesterday I would have said, this is very difficult, today I say, yeah, I think I can do it. And maybe tomorrow I'll say, for sure I can do it. And so I've seen myself change through the years, where I would have thought that things were going to be very challenging and not possible. And today I'll say, that's okay, we can manage, we can do it.
So you're saying just, you really have to stay with it. It's like a, it's
pra-
not an occasional thing. Is that what you're saying?
If you think about anything in life, whether it's baking cakes or bread, or whether it's computer work or anything, you have to practice. It's not enough just to know the theory. If you want to play tennis, you can play it badly and lose every time. But if you want to play properly, give the other one a good game, then you have to practice. So in anything in life, nothing happens instantly. It requires vision and focus and passion and practice. And if I have those things connected with my own inner spiritual growth, then I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to make sure that I meditate every single day. It's not a hobby that you pick up from time to time, but it's something that has to be consistent. It's like a relationship. If I want to have a relationship with you, I need to spend time with you to get to know you, to develop that bond, and to create that connection. And it's the same thing when I want to connect with the divine. I can do it occasionally if that's what I choose to do, but it won't be as nourishing and as satisfying as if I give regular, dedicated time, even a short amount of time, but dedicated time on a daily basis.
Okay. Feel free to come back to this, all right? All right, I wanted to go to the environmental subject because this is where you spent a lot of time. It's pretty clear that there's a big disturbance in the world, on the planet. What is the deeper explanation of the environmental crisis? And what kind of a shift do we need to make to begin to turn things around?
I don't want to burden you with lots of statistics, but the way things have been going, we've been using not just the resources of one planet, but if everybody were to have equal opportunity, we'd actually be using 1.5 times the planet and the resources that we have. Which means that at the current time, a lot of people are deprived, and so we're just about struggling along. But basically, it's because of an attitude of materialism, where we think matter is the most important, and we've moved very far away from our spiritual identity and spiritual values. And the result of that is that we've depleted our inner being. And so I won't say, yes, I can feel peace and love and truth. I'll probably say, I'm searching for peace, I'm searching for love, I'm searching for truth. And why we get stressed and burn out is because there's an emptiness of spirit. Or even when we have so much on an external level, and yet we still don't feel content, we feel there's something missing in our lives. All of this is a direct result of lack of connection with my own spiritual identity. And so I think if I buy something that's going to make me happy, well, it may for a short while, until I see that my neighbour's got a better car than I have. And that might be tomorrow. So I might be content with my beautiful new chariot today, but tomorrow that happiness is gone because somebody's got something else that's better. So everything has become very externalized. And as a result of that, society, which has become very, very consumer-oriented, means that it's consuming a huge amount of the resources of the planet. And as a result of that, we see that we've actually destroyed our own home. Out of all the species on the planet, we're the ones that have intelligence, the ones that have the greatest capacity. And yet what we've done with that is, through the force of negativity, destroyed our own home. No other species does that. Other species will create a little nest, will take care of it and keep it clean. And what we've done is we've had the abundance of nature. And even today, just look around, nature is still sustaining us so beautifully. And yet what we've done is exploit nature, aggressed nature, and really we've left it in a very toxic situation. So the water, the air, the food, the earth, everything has been poisoned. And that's not how nature intended it. But human beings, in their wonderful wisdom, have done this.
Well,
And
so we don't want to feel bad about this. We already feel bad about this. What can we do? What, is it too late?
I don't think it's too late. And I think the purpose of just pointing out the inner and the outer is to make us understand that, why are we talking about consciousness when it comes to climate? When we started talking about this at the UN conferences, that was the first question everybody asked us. What has consciousness got to do with climate? And then, as we continue to explain, and it doesn't take a long time to understand, there's a straight line connection between what's going on inside of me and what I'm doing outside. Well, the good news is that the message is getting across. UNESCO had a panel about 4 or 5 years ago. They had a booth, a section at the conference. And the panel that quoted what they were doing there said, changing minds, not climate. So I thought that, well, if UNESCO's come to that point where they are understanding this, I'm sure the message is going to reach out further, and it is. People are recognizing that they're still at the point where they talk about spiritual values, or rather human values. They're a bit scared still of using the word spiritual, but we're not scared of that. And so that's the message we share, that if I can come back to the awareness of who I am, the inner being, the living being that I am, then I'm going to be able to go within and discover that peace and happiness and joy and truth are actually inside of me. But being disconnected, I keep thinking it's outside. But if I take the time to spend even a little bit of time in silence, then I rediscover the truth of this, and I can simplify my life in a very big way, and I can make the right choices even today to bring about a change within myself, but also, and it's not a deprivation, when you do something with understanding for a higher purpose, you're not depriving yourself, but you feel very content that you're on track, that you're doing the right thing. And it becomes an amazing example and inspiration to everyone. And so, yes, we can make a difference, and we can change, and we can change our attitude and our perception, and make a change in the choices when we go to buy food, when we go to buy clothes. There's one of the persons who was here in the dialogue until this morning, she came with her daughter. Her daughter's in her 30s, so she's an adult. But the daughter doesn't ever buy new clothes. Now, that's a bit drastic. Even I would say that's a bit drastic. But she has this total understanding that fashion and consumerism are together. You know, they tell you, this is the model you should have today. This is the style that you should have today. And it doesn't matter what you had yesterday, forget it, get something new. And she refuses to buy into that. And so it's incredible that there are some people who are understanding and making those different choices. And what happens is that industry will listen if it hits them where the bottom dollar is, where the bottom line is. And like, for example, there's a whole new area, and again, it's actually been consumerism rather than a real change. There's a whole green economy, but the green economy is also now consumer-driven. But you couldn't buy oat milk 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Now you can walk into any store and they'll have an alternative to dairy milk.
So you're a little hopeful, are you? A little hopeful?
I'm totally hopeful.
Totally.
I don't think I'd have the courage to sit up here and talk to you if there was only a dark picture in front of me. I really wouldn't. But I see change happening. I see more and more people changing their diet to plant-based diet. I see more and more people turn to electrical cars, and that's happening also. But of course it needs a deeper change than just a few of these things. And change is not easy. It's uncomfortable. Am I right?
All right, I want to go right there. You're taking me right where I want to go. So the things you're talking about are changing patterns inside of us, right? Changing the pattern of what we want, changing the pattern of what we eat, changing even the patterns of how we respond, right? Anger, wanting, sorrow, all of that. How do we actually change the patterns that are running our life?
Big story. How do I change one habit? Never mind my whole perception and my whole attitude and everything that's inbuilt within me at the moment.
Yeah.
If I get something that's more beautiful than I have already, then human nature is that I want more of that. And so the journey of meditation, the journey going within, is sometimes turbulent, but the high spots that you experience when you experience yourself as that being of light, when you realize that it's not just peace coming from above, but it's also triggering the peace that's within you, and that moves you, and you begin to feel, well, I want more of this. Now, how can I have more of this? And life isn't just about sitting in a corner or on a mountaintop just meditating. Life is very much interaction and work and relationships and all the things that life is made up of. And so what you start doing is working out that if I've had that beautiful experience, even for a few moments when I'm silent and connected, I want to allow that experience now to be foremost in my thinking, in my speaking, and my doing. It's a choice that I make. I'll share a story with you. I hadn't really known about anger until I was in my 20s. I knew about tears and sorrow if somebody did something and you didn't like it or they said something, but my reaction internally wasn't of anger. But you know, there are layers and layers and layers. And by the time I was 23, I was living in a center, and I was very fortunate to have an amazing mentor. And as I carried on that inner journey, I found myself getting very angry in situations that I felt were unjust. And this kept happening. And each time I could feel that the anger was getting stronger, and it was like really there inside. Until the day came when, again, if I want to justify it, it could be very well justified. But of course, anger is never justified because it causes so much pain and sorrow to another. And there was something very wrong that happened, and I blew my top. And it was on the phone to someone. When I put the phone down, as I was speaking, I thought I was right. I put the phone down and I had this wave of sorrow. Why did I speak the way I did? And it's been a difficult journey to repair that relationship, but I think we're there now. It took a long time, but once I realized how much sorrow it was causing me, but also it was causing sorrow to the other, I decided I don't want to ever experience that again. And my meditation was very focused on being able to draw God's love and God's peace within myself. And gradually the anger subsided. And now I think it takes a lot to get me angry.
Okay, I want to linger here because I don't know about you, but do any of you ever get angry? And sometimes, do you get angry because of a really justified thing? Someone did something very, very bad, very wrong, like impossibly wrong. Are you sure that it's never justified? Because, we know, right? Sometimes these things that happen are really, really outrageous. You're in a country where, how many shootings have we had this year? 200? I don't know what the number is.
Judy, your mic, if you...
So, that's infuriating, right? So how do you know? Because you said in one line, well, of course, anger is never justified, right? Is that true?
I've come to understand that that is absolutely true.
Okay, so just explain that it's never justified.
Here's somebody who's done something wrong, but here am I with anger, and today it's directed in this place, but the anger is within me, and there'll always be other triggers. And so I'm going to live in a situation in which I'm caught up in a story in which my anger becomes ever deeper, ever stronger, and the reactions of anger then will come up not just in very specific situations, but that's the way I am now. And so it's going to be exploding. And probably it's going to be exploding at the people who are nearest and dearest to me. My children, my partner, my work colleagues. And so the point is that one person's wrong, but my anger is not right either. And simple arithmetic, 2 wrongs, do they make a right?
Well, I think what you're saying, so there's 2 things I want to ask. One is, I think you're talking about patterns of anger, right? That it becomes a pattern. If you don't change it, that's your tendency is to get angry, right? You respond more. But I think you're also saying that you're the first victim. That's what you're really saying, right? That when you hung up the phone, the sorrow that you felt. So whatever the other person, they also felt bad. But you're saying that you were the first victim of that. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
When I'm angry, it's not just the reaction, that the impact it has on the other, But just think about it in a different way. What is the impact it has on my own physiology? I know we have clever medical people sitting here, and they would tell you more than I can about blood pressure rising, heart rate moving very fast, your pulse moving very quickly, your adrenaline rising, all of these things. And where are you headed? Not in a very healthy, happy direction. And so all those are the immediate things that happen to your own body. And so what am I doing to myself?
Right.
And of course, the mental torture that I create for myself, the memory of what I've done stays with me and disturbs my sleep for a long stretch of time. And so, yes, I am the first victim. But the good news, some time ago, maybe it was 20, 30 years ago, they've been able to do a lot of work on consciousness and brain patterns and behavior, and the technology that's come about through science, especially in this area, is incredible. And what they've now found, and they tell us, is that brain patterns are not static, but there's a plasticity. Brain patterns can actually change if you are motivated and you decide to make them change. And so, yes, there are certain things that now I can manage. I don't get angry. And you've known me for 20 plus years. Can you remind me when you last saw me angry?
I'd have to give that a lot of thought. I don't think I've seen you in situations where you should have been angry, or where I would have been angry, but no, I think you've conquered it.
Well, I won't say that, because it's like, you know, when you're an alcoholic, you're always...
One day at a time, or whatever, one step at a time.
Yeah. So you can never say that, yes, I can guarantee that it's gone. Who knows?
Right.
But yes, I'm on the journey.
Well, so similar but a little bit different. A lot of good people, and this is a room full of good people, spend a lot of their time trying to help others, right? Trying to help individuals in the family or in the community, dedicating to causes. We talked about Roberta, who came with her daughter, people who really, really trying hard to make things better. And when it doesn't happen, if I've been taking soup to my friend, and my friend never says thank you, and my friend just maybe doesn't even, tells me they don't like the soup I brought, or to take it to a small level, or I've been working really hard on climate change or addiction issues or poverty or whatever, and it doesn't get any better, what can happen is disheartenment, right? I mean, can really lose altitude, really lose hope, feel like, what was the point of all that? What do we do about that?
I think if you're persistent and you're motivated to keep going, and I think that you have to keep replenishing your own battery every single day, which means that there can be compassion deficit. I can just lose that sense and become insensitive to the suffering of others, or just ignore it or try and pretend it doesn't, be in a state of denial about it. So I need to keep replenishing my own inner battery. That's the first thing. But the second thing is to know that everything has to reach a certain critical mass, and then things can change. And it's a huge population we have in the world today. And so sometimes it feels like we're trying to push the boulder uphill. But keep going, you'll get there. And once you're at the top of the hill, then things will change. And you won't be pushing hard anymore. Things will be happening in a very natural way. It was like when I came back from India after having gone through my own transformation, when I decided that this is to be my life. I came back and there was no centre outside of India at that time. This is 1969. And I knocked on many doors thinking that they'd be interested in these ideas. Yoga by then was on the scene. And so I went to many yoga
Hadn't the
organizations.
Beatles gone to India and
That's
seen
right.
the light? So, right?
TM had been popularized by the Beatles. A vegetarian diet had come onto the scene. So it was a time of a lot of change happening within society. The students' revolution had happened in France.
Right.
So many things, again, a lot of change. But what happened was yoga organizations, I went knocking on their doors, and they said, no, we're not really interested. They had many reasons, many excuses. And I wrote to, I think a photograph is somewhere here. Anyway, a wonderful lady, and some of you knew her, Dadi Prakash Mani. She was the head of the organization at that time. And she'd only been in that position for some months. A very, very wise and wonderful woman. By the way, our leadership is, by constitution, women-led. So, stranger things have happened in the world. But she was one of our first leaders when the founder passed away. And she had a very simple message for me. She said, it's okay if there isn't any response in terms of service outside. Have you thought about spending your time in self-service?
Really?
Yeah. And that was a huge turning point for me. And for about a year, I really focused on inner transformation. I was very fortunate. I had the circumstances in which I could do that. But my family was supportive, parents were supportive, so they let me experiment. And my father at that time actually thought, she's such an active person, she's going to get bored. But he didn't realize at that time, he did later on, and I'm glad to say that he became a very active member of the Brahma Kumaris. But at that point, he thought I'd get bored. So give her enough space and it's okay.
This will pass. Huh?
Something like that. But it was an amazing experience for me because I really was able to go very deep within myself. And of course, I thought I knew myself by then, but I didn't. It was still a long journey further ahead. But what happened was that I developed the capacity to actually go within and not be dependent on external outcomes, which was so important. And also, it took a bit of ego away. Didn't take it away completely. Again, that's work in progress all the time. But it was a big ego crunch.
Now, did you stop knocking on doors?
I was sending letters. I wasn't actually going to places by then. And almost exactly a year later, something quite magical happened. I wrote a letter. We got an appointment with the secretary of this organization. Real story, no additions. And we went to meet this person. And I was showing him this album from India that had these photographs of images that they use there, explaining about Raj Yoga. And one image early on was this image, the image of light. And he was fascinated and wanted to know a bit more. I explained that this is the representation of as a symbol of that divine being, that spark of light that we meditate on. And at the end of that he said, okay, when can you come to give a series of talks? And I was very surprised. And we sorted out the logistics of when the next, and I'd never given 4 lectures in my life. I'd given 1 lecture, but I'd never given 4 lectures as a series. And how long had I been practicing meditation seriously? Just a couple of years by then. But anyway, so after we sorted out dates and times and the fact that we don't charge money for lectures, he was very surprised. And he said, well, my organization has to give you this. I said, that's fine. Then you can put it in your own fund. You can add it to your own box. Again, surprise. But I asked him, you're meeting us for the first time. How come you trust us to the extent that you're opening your doors for a whole series? And he said, I've just come back from a sabbatical. I needed to take time out for myself for reflection. I've had a year of silence. And at the end of that year, I had a vision of this being of light.
Really?
So when you showed me this image and spoke about this, it resonated. And I could feel that whatever you would share would be okay.
That's quite a story. I've never heard you tell that story.
We should spend more time together.
Let's work
We
on
live on
that.
different continents and meet maybe twice a year.
I'd love that. All right. I want to shift to something very specific. One of the biggest problems facing society is addiction. And we have it up here, just like everyone has it everywhere. And there's, of course, all kinds of addiction. From a spiritual perspective, what is addiction? You know, what drives addiction? And what would be a spiritual remedy, not to discount the other remedies, but what would be the spiritual stance, the spiritual remedy if someone is really struggling with addiction?
I want to explain a circle, and it's a circle that goes on in here. The thought comes, and there's a filter. It passes through the filter, it comes into action, and the action creates a pattern, not just within the spiritual being, the soul, but within the brain. And from that, then, similar situation, and the next thought comes. And if the thought is stronger than the filter, I'm using the word filter, but I actually mean conscience. And this is one of the capacities of the inner being, thoughts and feelings and emotions, and then the filter, the conscience, the receptacle of experience where I hold the memory of what I've been through, and then the patterns of behavior. All this is happening not in the brain, in the soul. And then, yes, there's an impact left on the brain. But a stage comes where, when the soul is empty, without that awareness of the spirit within. And if you look at what spiritual input there is in life today, generally speaking, it's minuscule, if anything at all.
Right.
I mean, when I went to school in London, I wasn't a Christian, but I was happy to join the regular assembly, and we would have beautiful music and time for silence. And then we would sing together, we would pray together, and it was really very beautiful. And so you grew up with that sense. We were taught about prayers before meals, at Thanksgiving, not once a year, but every single meal. So it was part of the culture at that time. And today, school assemblies don't really have prayer. They have announcements, they have a spiritual, well, a moral. They have maybe a moral talk,
I don't think we're allowed to have prayer, are we? I don't think we can. By law, we can't do that. Well, we could talk about values. I mean, we could do that.
Yeah.
Right. And
So
that's
this-
what you're saying.
So that's what I'm saying, that all of these things have slowly, they say a family that prays together stays together. Does that tell you something about what's going on in family life today?
Yeah.
So all that input has gone. And so the empty spirit means that I need external stimulus.
So the addiction, then, you're
And
saying,
so-
connects with the empty spirit, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so it can be substance addiction of any type, or it can be even the addiction to anger, greed, ego. All of these things are the subtle addictions that we all carry within ourselves. And what's happening inside in here is that the thought comes, and maybe at first I recognize that that's not a good way to go, but gradually company and others around me, society, and I get taken in, and I say, okay, well, why not? And so the filter starts breaking down, and the conscience isn't strong enough to withstand the power of my thought. And so it goes through into action, and this pattern is created. And at a point of time, and probably this denial that it is a pattern of behavior that I've developed, that I've become dependent on something. And so that denial is there, but also then, beyond the denial, I see that it's impacting my family and my friends, and is creating a lot of sorrow because things are falling apart. Even at that time, I've now become so depleted in myself that there's no longer the power even to say no.
Right. So where does that, how can there be an intervention when someone is that depleted, to use your word? So I'm so depleted. I may see that I'm harming people, but I'm just too weak. So what
The
can I
amazing
do?
thing is that I don't know what is the trigger, but when something gets triggered within the soul, and they reach out and they come to us for spiritual understanding, and we don't ask them about their habits, about alcohol or vegetarian food or drugs or anything like that. We just start talking to them about the soul, and it begins to make sense. And they start meditating, and just a little bit of meditation, and certainly within a week, cigarette addiction can go.
Really?
Yeah. And it doesn't
Have you
go
seen it?
just...
You've seen it?
I've seen it. I've seen it.
Wow.
In fact, within 4 days, not
Really?
even a week. And other addictions take a bit longer. But what's happening is that the soul connecting with the divine, and you're drawing that power, and the power is not just energy, but the power together with that is also the power of love, the power of peace. You're rediscovering what used to be very natural, the love, the peace, the purity. These are the natural ingredients of every single soul. That's the good news.
So is it like there's a little light gets lit? Is it a little light of hope? Is that what you're saying? They
That's
begin
right.
to- yeah.
And they begin to feel powerful enough, a day at a time, and maybe I can do without this for a day, a week, a month.
Okay.
And they then come back to us and tell us that this was their experience.
This was the beginning.
And it's not a temporary transition. It's a deep-rooted transformation that happens.
Because the remedy is the inside remedy. That's what
That's
you're
right,
saying.
because now the soul is receiving what it was actually longing for.
Right. Huh. Okay, I want to ask you about another experience that a lot of us have had, which is an experience of the loss of someone or something we loved very much. And we heard it this weekend in the dialogue about a family dog, right? That they adored, they got unlimited love from, and how devastated. But we lose a loved one. We lose something that we've cared about a lot. We feel, sometimes we can feel like disoriented even. What is what's most helpful at that point? What's most helpful for the person with the loss, and what's most helpful for those around that person who want to be comforting?
Let me take up the story of bereavement, because that's very clear. Breakups and breakdowns is another story. But when a soul has left the body, and it's actually, when we say human being, the being is the spirit and the human is the physiology. And we've forgotten about the being, and we just focused on the human doing and the physical side of life. But in fact, the reality is that the soul that was occupying that body has now left. And so you've got the shell, but it's without that life that I knew and loved. Once I can understand this as a basic principle, and not everybody is willing to understand that, they think, well, the body's gone, everything has finished, and there isn't anything further. And it's more difficult for them. But where people have been reflecting on life and have these questions, well, if you can understand that soul and body are two things that come together to create the human being, the soul is alive. It isn't dead. The soul, in scriptural terms, across the world, all the scriptures speak about the soul as being eternal and immortal. And if I explain just one little thing that helped me understand that, thoughts. Can you measure thoughts? We've done well in science to create technology that can measure consciousness now. And they're beginning to get there in terms of being able to measure thoughts. But the thing about thoughts is that you cannot limit thoughts by time or distance. I can go back to this morning, or I can go back to 20 years ago. I can go forward in time. I can think about where I'm going to be tomorrow, and I wonder what I'll be like 20 years from now. Will I be around? So my mind can switch from past to future to present with no time, no distance involved at all. I can think about New York. I can think about London in the same thought, one moment to the next. And so thoughts are beyond time and space. Feelings, how do you measure feelings? Again, beyond measure. How do you measure the beauty of a rose? The rose is physical, but the beauty, is it the length of the stem? Is it the diameter of the flower? How do you measure it? And so there are things that are real, but you cannot measure. And these things are not physical. So my perception of beauty, my understanding or experience of love and truth, this isn't the brain, this is consciousness. And what I'm saying is that consciousness is the soul itself. And we would add to that that this image of light is not just the image of the source, but it's the image of the being that each and every one of us is. And so the soul is eternal, it does not die, it's beyond time and distance. And my thoughts reach the soul. And if in bereavement I'm feeling a lot of grief, my thoughts of grief are reaching that soul that has gone wherever it's gone. It's gone on its journey. And if there's real love, then I don't want to be creating discomfort with my grief. What I need to do is to spend time with God, with myself, reminding myself that everyone who's come has to leave at some point, and my thoughts of love can reach that soul if I bring God into the equation. So my thoughts in yoga and sending God's light to that soul are helping and supporting the soul on its journey. And when somebody, and usually I meet people who do believe these things, sometimes I meet others, but very often it's more likely that they do believe. And this is the one thing that pulls them out of their grief. It's not a denial of grief. Yes, of course I'm going to miss that individual.
Is it okay to send that thought? I miss you and I love you? Or do I have to say only I love you in my head?
You don't have to say it out aloud.
Oh, no, in my head.
But it's the thought.
So if I'm having the thought, I miss you and I love you, that's okay?
Yeah.
They're not going to get sad, right?
That's not going to disturb them.
Okay, just checking.
But just sending them love, but God's power. So me on my own, I miss you and I love you, is actually not enough. It has to be filled with that extra power. Then it's going to reach, I don't know where they are. So
Right.
I don't know how to reach them. But the power of God coming in means that it's directed to the right individual, to the right soul, and it helps them on their journey.
So it's God, it's the connection with God that gives the power to the thought that I'm having, the love that I'm having. Okay. All right. So I have another question connected with love. Sister Jayanti, there are some people that are hard to love. It's easy to love puppies. It's easy to love babies. There are some people that are really hard to love. And we hear about unlimited love. So how do we develop love for the hard to love?
Can I go beyond the thorny nature and see the soul, the shining light that is there within this being? And if I can focus on that, and I can make sure that I don't get into a situation where I'm locking horns with them, then I know that this is how they are, but they can't help it. But beyond that crusty surface, there's a soul. And that soul has truth and love and peace. And if I keep my vision focused on that, they melt. Mm-hmm. They really melt. And again, this is practical experience. And I don't want to tell you names and stories, but it's a real experience. A person I was having great difficulty with, now she is older, she is more mature. But
Is she less thorny? Is she less thorny and crusty?
Certainly with me she is, right. Not with everyone.
Okay.
But she gives me this beautiful smile every time I meet her. And 20 years ago she wouldn't have done that.
So we just look at that little permanent
So
being.
it takes time.
Yeah.
But the thought behind that effort was that I'm not giving her love because I want love back. I'm giving her love because I want to develop that state of being within myself in which there is only love. And I'm not going to differentiate between this one and this one and this one. I'm not going to discriminate. And so when you see something within yourself and you begin to work on it, even if it takes a long time, it does work.
That's very nice. Now I have another question, but do you have any question? Anyone? Anything I've forgotten? Yeah, microphone here, please, Brother Reno.
Om Shanti. In a global environment, a political environment that you're involved with, I'm wondering how change can come about peacefully when leaders are not even able to use the word God, and most change happens with anger and violence. What is a political leader to do?
What's a political leader to do?
I'll give you two examples, and they've made public statements about this, so I'm not infringing their privacy in any way. A woman called Christiana Figueres, who knows the name? She was the Executive Secretary General for climate change conferences from 20-something to 2016, for a period of about 11 years, 11, 12 years. And she became a very good friend because various things, and we came very close, and there would be a big conference with 8,000 people going on, but she'd shut the door and tell a secretary, I need time for myself. And we would meditate together and talk together. And she would be in a situation where several times she would feel hopeless and say to me, I feel like banging their heads together because they're not listening. What can I do? And we'd have a chat, and there would be a different Christiana by the time we left about 45 minutes later. And in 2015, she was able to pull off the agreement between all the governments, and one loophole that was a conscious loophole was that it wasn't legally binding, but all the government officials who were part of the discussions, the negotiations, and at that time actually it was the top leaders who had come. It was the prime ministers and presidents and so on. They all came to an agreement that we would nationally determine our goals and see how we can reduce carbon emissions by, I think the deadline was 20-something. I think she was only able to get leaders to actually listen to each other, talk to each other, without fighting, without screaming, and make that happen. And then, of course, because there was a loophole, they would not agree to anything that was legally binding. But at least we took a big step forward where there was an understanding, and they understood that we must not allow temperatures to rise beyond 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels. And it's now already 1.5 degrees above those levels. So let's see the future. But she had an impact, and it was because of her spiritual awareness. And she had that spirituality already. I think she just needed a few of us to support her and say, what about this? What about this? And the turning point came when we had a meeting with her, and she'd given, and I'd flown from London to Bonn, where she was, her office was there. The climate change office is still there. And another sister had flown from Copenhagen to come, and then there was somebody local who was with us. So she knew we'd taken a lot of trouble to come for this meeting. And she had us sit with her chief of staff and a few other people. And 10 minutes into the meeting, somebody gave her a little note. And when the conversation on a particular subject finished, she said, I'm going to have to leave this meeting because one of my colleagues and good friends is in hospital, and she's going to be leaving very shortly. This is the news I have. And so my colleague from Copenhagen said, should we have a few minutes of meditation for her? And she agreed. And so I conducted a meditation. We do meditations with commentaries. So a short commentary meditation to send God's light and love to that soul. She left, went to the hospital. She told us to carry on our meeting, which anyway was very, very useful. And by the time I reached London that same evening, she sent us a message to say, that she was there in good time. She was able to tell her friend that everybody had meditated for her, and the friend was very pleased, very happy, and left soon after that very peacefully. Now this had such an impact on Christiana that made her say every conference, I need time. So some things happen that you can't predict, but they're a turning point. Another woman, it happens to be a woman, the President of India currently. She's not an executive authority, that's the Prime Minister. The system in India is that the President is more a figurehead, but of course they have national impact and sometimes international impact, but certainly she's had a huge impact nationally. She's been a Brahma Kumari for the last 15 plus years, and she's tribal, and it seemed as if she wasn't going to get an education beyond 10 years of age, but things worked and she did. And she rose to become the governor of a state, and she followed her discipline of meditation, of plant-based diet and simplicity in her lifestyle, all of that. And then she was elected. It's an election process for president, even though it's not an executive authority. She became president of the country last year, last September, I think it was. And she's been a role model for people. Tribal, woman, in position by election, and a woman who follows her principles. And so, who knows what the future holds. Even a year ago, we would not have said that this is a woman who can become president. And there she is, and I'm sure that within their discussions, she brings to the table something of values. So, hope.
So if meditation is the secret, yes, Robert.
Yeah, my question is about...
Can you wait for the microphone to come to you? Because the webcast people won't hear you.
Yeah, the title of this is Call of the Time. And this is sort of a question for the both of you, because I want both your American perspective and yours.
Can you put the mic?
And yours from England, Europe. So it's about news. I'm a news person, and I'm wondering, you know, you're very engaged in environmentalism. Where do you get your news? How do you digest your news? Because, you know, news here, especially in the U.S., is it's toxic tribalism. So if you could talk about how, you know, we engage in that consciousness and be informed, because, you know, somebody like myself who, you know, has a history of working in activism, you know, I was very engaged with DC politics, and I got disgusted with it, and I shut off the news. And I was just shut out, you know, for like 5 years. And so I'm curious about the two of you, your perspectives.
Mr. Jayanti, what's your take? Okay, I just want to check in with you first and say we are running a little over time. Are you able to stay for another 15 minutes or so? Are you okay with that? All right. Well, you're asking a question close to my heart. I spent about 25 years working on this in a project with the Brahma Kumaris called Images and Voices of Hope. And the essence was that the news model that was being used everywhere was creating harm. which is what your question says, that it was just we'd show one shooting, and then we'd show one bombing, and then we'd show one house on fire, and then right? And each time it would be alarming for the viewers. So when we had a tragedy here that was in Newtown, Connecticut, not too far from here, that I think permanently broke the hearts of it wasn't just people in this area. It was the shooting of 7-year-olds. And at that point, I went and met with Curtis Clark, the editor of the Newtown paper, and said, what's the role of the Newtown paper when something like this happens? And he said, I felt we had to create a redemptive narrative so we wouldn't be the saddest place on earth for the rest of time. So based on that, we began to campaign for something we called restorative narratives. And I think this is true in our lives as well as in the news, which is you focus on recovery, because almost everybody recovers. 80% of the population has that nature, to the resilient nature. So we're focusing on recovering, focusing on getting well, focusing on the strength, etc., which is very close to what Sister Jayanti's been talking about, right? Because when the mind goes to the thing that's going to give life, then the light kind of grows inside. And so then it's about talking editor by editor, producer by producer, right? It's a one-by-one process to say, we need another way to tell the story of our time, or else we're all going to be too sad to do anything.
I think Judy has actually managed to give you both perspectives, the spiritual perspective and also the practicality on the ground. I just want to add another word of hope again. Spirituality, the word is loaded, but values, people are more and more interested in the subject of values. And in India, for about 20 years now, probably, they've been running a values training course, first at one university, then now several universities, and it's a BA, and then further an MA, and now a PhD. People can study values, and of course it then brings in all these ideas also, but the packaging is values.
So we have this thing we call serving through the mind, Mansa Seva, which is a way that you can support people just with your thoughts, support the world, support whatever. So I thought to ask you to finish with that, explain it if you would, and then take us through the process. Because sometimes when we feel most helpless, to just know we can do something, right, is comforting. So,
whenever there's any tragedy, whether it's a natural disaster or human-created, Dadi Janki, who was the second head of our organization after Dadi Prakashmani, and she was my personal mentor for 40 years. So Dadi Janki used to ask the question, what are you going to do having heard this news? And her point was, don't just say, I feel sorry about it, but do something, and that meant sending good vibrations. And so she would remind us of that. Anything that she heard about in a family situation, world situation, she would remind us. And so Mansa Seva means being able to allow your mind to be a vehicle to serve whoever needs that love, that strength, that help through God's remembrance. It also needs a mind that's capable of doing that. So Mansa Seva is also serving my mind and cleaning it. Serving my mind means to give it a good clean up and to maintain that, but Mansa Seva is sending out our thoughts. Shall we experiment with that?
Let's do it.
Please carry on sitting comfortably. You don't have to sit on the floor or stand on your head. But let your body sit with preferably both feet on the ground so that the body is balanced. And you don't have to close your eyes. If you wish to, that's okay. But if you want to experiment further, focus on that point of light that you see in front of you. And I'll speak my own thoughts as I meditate and invite you to follow those ideas. Reflecting on all the things I've been hearing about, I decide to go on an inner journey. Going deeper and deeper within myself, coming to the awareness of the inner being. I am a being of light. I live in this body, in the center of the forehead. And in this awareness of my spiritual identity, I can feel the peace that lies within. And in this awareness, I can feel the presence of the divine, the supreme, the source. And from that being, the ocean of peace and the ocean of love, the power of love and the power of peace surround the soul. The power of love heals the soul so that the wounds of the past can finish forever. And the power of peace transforms the soul so that I can maintain this peace within myself. And from the ocean of peace and the ocean of love, love reaches out beyond this place, out into the world, wherever souls need it and are ready to receive it. And God's love surrounds the human family. And God's peace touches human hearts. God's light and God's love reaches out to all the species of life and offers them solace and safety, that they will be protected and not be harmed. God's light and peace reaches out to all forms of nature, all the elements, the earth, the air, the water, the space, the ether. God's light purifies and rejuvenates so that nature returns to a state of harmony. And the love that surrounds us ensures that there's harmony amongst humans and all other species, and humans and the planet itself. I hold this vision sharing God's light and love and peace with all. And now I come back to the moment here and now. In the physical dimension. But I keep this experience with me so that I am guided in my thoughts, words, and actions by this light, love, and peace. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sister Jayanti.
Thank you for very insightful questions.
Thank you, Sister Jayanti. Thank you, Sister Judy. Did you see how Judy is so wise in playing badminton with her questions? With the real-time questions, practical questions. And she's very right about Sister Jayanti. That Sister Jayanti has answers for every question, right? And so very beautifully, Sister Jayanti has given us a hope this afternoon, a hope to get rid of anger, right? And she spoke about vision, focus, passion, and practice. She emphasized on the practice and also the consciousness, how it impacts the climate, the practice of going within, seeing the soul, the eternal, immortal light, and also seeing the shining light in others, how it develops, it helps us develop love for the one it's hard to love. So many more things Sister Jayanti has shared with us. So thank you. So before we close this event, a few announcements. So we have a tradition in the Brahma Kumaris to close any event with Toli and blessings. Some of you may be knowing. Toli is a piece of sweet that we make in God's remembrance and with pure wishes, pure vibes. So Toli and blessings we will receive from Sister Jayanti, and Sister Jayanti will be here on the stage. So we'll walk from my left hand side, and you take the Toli blessings and Drishti, that is the spiritual vision from Sister Jayanti, and you walk from here. And after Toli and blessings, we will have some refreshments for you in the porch right here. And at 6:30, we have World Meditation Hour. Every third Sunday, we dedicate 1 hour for Mansa Seva, as Sister Jayanti just mentioned, giving light and might to the world, giving good wishes to the world. So after Tolian blessings and light refreshments, from 6:30 to 7:30, we will have World Meditation Hour here. And those who would like to sit for the meditation, you're most welcome to join us. And those who are on Zoom, you can actually check your Zoom chat message to switch the link to attend the World Meditation Hour, which is from 6:30. Please check your chat messages for the link. And also, the bookshop will be open after this event, so you're welcome to also, visit our bookshop. So I guess those are the announcements, but just let me, and also the registrations. Those who would like to be on our mailing list and have registered before, thank you. And those who haven't registered, you're welcome to register. There is a table as you exit this Inspiration Hall, and you can register for any events that you would like to attend in future. I guess that's it. So thank you so much for taking time and coming to Peaceful Age and being with us and making this space more precious with your presence. Thank you.